Alright, I recently got a DX9 and I have a lot of transmitters sitting around, so I figured I'd go over them each briefly and point out what I like and don't like about them. Most of you who ever bought anything ready to fly from Blade or E-flite are probably familiar with this. Has a very low resolution. You don't realize it because you're new, but you move up the stick and all of a sudden you hit the next step and then the helicopter will do a little tip. With where everything else you do a little motion and it's just smooth. It's just so smooth and controlled. Plus they're computerized, well, at least the 6i and above are, so you can program in dual rates and expo, and you can tame down even the most wild airplane or helicopter, bring it down to your settings, and then you can put the different flight settings on a switch and go between beginner and advanced modes, which is great. So if you have one of these, move on to one of the other ones. First computerized radio was the 6i. I believe I paid $250 when it came out. Right now you can pick one up for $140 new. But it was totally worth the jump. Like I said, the resolution is great. You just move the stick a little bit. You have a lot of control. Has 10 model memory. It had a screen that gave you the information you needed, but not too much. It was the basics, where your trim's at, what kind of model you're flying, and what your battery is, and then the model name up in the corner there. But it was perfect for what I needed to learn that computerized radios are just amazing. And I remember thinking, I will never need anything more than this. It doesn't have that little knob up the top for a channel, and it doesn't have a trainer button. It just has a trainer switch. It's an entire switch dedicated to the just trainer. And that's pretty much all I have to say about that. Right. The first time I held a DX8, it was my friend Bob's. He was letting me fly his little UMX GB, and I immediately felt the difference. It's heavier, the grips are rubberized, it doesn't feel like it's going to slip out of your hand, and the controls just felt smoother. Or, could have been my memory, but to me, it felt smoother, like a much nicer flight. So, after that, I was up at the local hobby store, time flies, and Ray talked me into the DX8, and I have not regretted it. The 30 model memory, didn't think I'd ever fill it up. I was wrong about that. They keep coming out like this AS3 Extra that's coming out, that little ultra micro extra. There's videos on YouTube, find them. It's just amazing, like $100. You just buy it. As the price of things go down, you just keep buying things, and you fill that up faster than you think. Now the DX8 has a SD card on the side, which was great. I think this was a big help with my 453D because I had problems with it on the DX6i, and I found out that the settings were wrong. I might have put in wrong settings, but I can never get it flying right. But I downloaded the model from Blade, put it on here, and all of a sudden my 453D was flying awesome. Of course, it has a knob for a channel, has a lot of switches available for everything. Of course, one of the big differences between the 6i and the 8 was the control panel, much easier to read. You can see your model is clearly in the center. You can see what kind of model you're flying, and the timer, which is very important, was very large and easy to see. So that is one of the biggest differences between the 6i and the DX8. It's just the screen was so much easier to read. Now when I picked up my 9, of course they bumped up the resolution. As you can see, my model name is in the upper left hand corner, along with the type of modulations using, the DSMX. You have your model type clearly displayed, and apparently those are adjustable if you tweak some model settings, but I haven't played that with that yet. There's quite a few built-in ones. Search RC groups for that, you'll find it. The timer is actually a little bit smaller than the other one. That surprised me, but then again, one of the big features on this is the voice. It talks to you. Love it. Now, one of the reasons I actually got the DX9 was the wireless trainer. I wasn't thinking about the voice at all until tonight when I set up a wireless trainer with my son's DX8, because he got that, because That was his before, and he just gets bumped up every time I get bumped up. So I set this up.
Student has control. No student signal.
And it was great.
No student signal.
It tells me exactly who has control. And all this stuff, all the voices you can set up. I have it set up for all my timers. It counts down every minute, and then the last 30 seconds, and then the last 10 seconds. Then if I go beyond that, it counts up every minute, which is great for things like my 350QX. You fly it aggressively, you get about 8 minutes worth of time. If I'm just hovering around the backyard, you get about 12 minutes. So I have the timer set at 8. When it hits 8, it'll count up every minute after that, and around minute 10, I know to start watching for the light blinking on the back of the 350QX telling me my battery's dead. But I just turned on the 8, and now
student has control.
Student has control. I have it on a switch, and I have it on this switch. I'll get to that in a second why.
Instructor has control.
And you just take back control like that. Of course, you can leave it on the bind button, but you have to hold it down while you're doing it. If you put it on another switch and you just
student has control.
Do the switch, then whenever you hit
instructor has control.
That, there's a setting, you do it, you set so you can just take control when you hit the switches. Now the reason I have it on this switch is we're doing the Nano QX, which has safe mode and agility mode, and I had that set for this switch. And so I put the trainer on this, on what's normally the gyro, and for some reason when I handed control over to him, it would switch over to agility, and then I would take control back and give it back to him, and then he'd be in regular, but I didn't like that. So I sat down, I did it on this switch, and it would switch between the two, and then I didn't change switches from here back, and it did the same thing over here. All of a sudden this would not only give control, but flip it over to agility mode. It was funny because I was just flipping which switch was the trainer switch back, and it kept doing that. So I think that might be a bug. I put it over here on my little F switch, which, does that look crooked to you? That's the only other thing I noticed about this radio.
Time remaining 2 minutes.
Love that. And all of a sudden it started working, so I'm happy with it over there. I'll just get used to that side being my trainer switch. I hardly ever use those switches over there anyhow. Now, another difference I noticed, which I liked, I had one of the Helimax controllers, a good programmable one. Unfortunately, I didn't care for their helicopters or quadcopters, so I ended up selling all that stuff. But one thing that it had that now that the DX9 has is this. When you're setting a switch...
Time remaining 2 minutes.
Oh, we're down to 2 minutes again. Wonderful. The switches are lettered A through I, and to switch, you select it, it's blinking, then you flip the switch you want.
Student has control. Instructor has control.
And it programs it down here. Now, of course, you can switch through. I'm going to put it back to B. But you hit a switch, and it changes it there.
Student has control. Instructor
so it
has
is really
control.
easy to program
Student
your switches.
Has control. Instructor has control.
And that reminds me of another function. I'm going to hit back all the way to the beginning. And when you're at the beginning and you hit back, you can set the volume.
Volume 10.
So hit it again, and then I bring it back up to
volume 50.
Now, anything above 60 I find gets distorted and is just annoying. But it's nice that you can control the volume, because tonight I was using this with Phoenix, and I can turn...
Time remaining 1 minute.
That was a quick minute. So I was just able to turn all the sounds off, and I can play with my flight sim at night without bothering anyone, because I just turn all the sounds off on everything. Another thing that the others don't have are these sliders on the back. They're nice. They're a little hard to move, but you can open up and adjust them, which I think I may do, because you can get them to be really smooth. And you can program channels to them. I've tried it. It's relatively easy. Other thing that's different, this Chrysler building looking antenna. There's a secondary antenna built into this handle. So here they are, all the transmitters from Spektrum that I've used over the past 16 months. This thing, if you have one, save up $140, get yourself the 6i. If you can afford $300 or $400, just immediately upgrade, because there is a noticeable difference between each transmitter. It's just amazing how every time I move up, I'm like, oh, I'll never go above this. Now this just came out, so hopefully I'll have this for a year or two, or maybe even 3. But God knows with Spektrum, they come out with stuff all the time. Didn't the 18QQ just come out not too long ago? But that was $1,200, and as much as I wanted the hat that came with it, I wasn't willing to spend it. One last note, and I hate telling the story, but I have to. This is my 3rd DX9. I felt like a king in a swamp castle. The first one, I exported and imported something into memory, not realizing there was a firmware update, and it bricked. Then the second one, I went to register it to get the firmware update, because the firmware update's tied to the serial number, and I could not register the serial number. That is a known issue. Horizon Hobby offered to send me a label and ship it back. My local hobby store took care of me instead. And the third one, before I even left the store, we updated the firmware, and it has stayed, and it has been beautiful since. So if you do buy one of these, first thing you do, upgrade the firmware. I'm going to bed. Have a good night, everyone.